Welcome to the Possibility Action Network podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Middleton, aka Possibility Man. We're committed to bringing you guests who strive to better people's lives and serve as a force for good in the world. Our guest today is Tina Baxter. She is a board certified nurse practitioner with a specialty in gerontology. She has practiced nursing for over 25 years. She is the founder of Baxter Professional Services, which provides a variety of programs, including wellness and chronic disease management. She is a healthcare educator and the founder of the Nurse Shark Academy. Tina is also a public speaker, writer, and media personality. Tina, welcome to the show today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I have a ton of questions to ask you, but first, this program note to our listeners and our viewers, your support matters. Follow, like, and share this podcast wherever you find it. Tina, I was intrigued about your long term in the nursing profession, and I want to ask you, at what point in your life did you consider the nursing path for a career?
I didn't consider nursing until college. Up until then, I've always had an interest in science. So my goal was always doing something in science. And when I started college, my initial goal was to go to medical school because that's what I thought I wanted. I started my biology degree and uh, spent some time with my cousin who's an OBGYN. And I love my cousin and I'm very grateful for his practice. I have lots of cousins and aunties that are all in the healthcare field profession. And I spent 2 weeks with him and I realized something. I did not want that lifestyle.
Huh.
He was always at work. He was always working, always on call, had all the toys, never got to enjoy them. He had a very busy OB/GYN practice,
Mm.
like one of two in the area where he lived.
Uh-huh.
So he was always working. And in the course of doing that, I realized that's not what I wanted to do, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And since I was a fifth year senior and my parents were very tired of paying for a very expensive education at a private Christian university, I had to make a decision. So I got a job working in a nursing home as a certified nursing assistant. And it was there that I discovered nursing and realized that that was my true calling. Is I wanted to be a nurse because I wanted to talk to the patients. I wanted to spend time with the patients. And I knew that I would not be afforded that opportunity if I became a physician.
Uh-huh, I see. Okay, so you became a registered nurse. What was
Yes.
that training like for you? What was it like to study to become an RN? Because you could have stopped at LPN. What
Mhm.
was it like, and why did you go all the way to RN?
Well, as a CNA, I thought, okay, I see these other nurses. If they can do it, I can do it.
Okay.
And my decision was, okay, I've made the decision. I'm going to go do it. So I just called up a sister university. I talked to my boyfriend, now husband, and he said, well, I know that they have a school of nursing in the city where I live. Why don't you give them a call? It's another Christian university. So I called them and I said, let me in. Now, mind you, this is 2 weeks before the semester began.
Uh,
And I said, I'm going to transfer. Just let me.
yeah.
And they said, well, you have to get into the school, the university first, and then apply to the School of Nursing.
Mm.
So I did. And I said, let me in. And 2 weeks before the semester started, I got in.
Wow.
It wasn't until later that I figured out that it was really hard to get into nursing school.
Okay.
But I had the intention that I was going to go. And I just called them up and said, I want in, let me in.
Mm.
And I was a fifth year senior. So I transferred in as a sophomore.
Wow.
So I finished my biology degree. I had my degree in biology, and then I got my second degree as a bachelor prepared nurse, and became a registered nurse.
Yeah.
And my first day in nursing class, I remember sitting there, and they were telling me about the practice of nursing, and I just thought, I have found my tribe. I
Wow.
found my people. This is where I need to be. This is where all the good stuff is happening. And that's how I fell in love with nursing. And it's been a lifelong journey, and I still enjoy and love being a nurse.
That's fantastic. That's a good story. I'm glad I asked you that question. But then you didn't stop there. So you loved it so much, you became a nurse practitioner. What prompted you to go there?
Well, I was thinking about going to graduate school to get an MBA,
Mm.
because at that time I was working in management as a nurse. I was a nurse supervisor and manager. And I was also a parish nurse, a church nurse, which is something I did as a child. I was a junior nurse at church, right? So you got to
Okay.
understand that. But as a professional practice, as a parish nurse, I would go into the churches and help them with blood pressure screenings and things like that, to impact the community. So there was an opportunity for me to take a parish nursing course for graduate credit. So I thought, well, this would be a great way for me to kind of see if I can do graduate work while I'm working full time and being a wife and all this. And so I applied to the school for graduate credit with the intention of just trying it out.
Mm.
But I had worked with the dean of the school at that time, when I was an undergraduate student for the State Nursing Association. I was on the committee as a student rep. So she knew me and knew of me. So when I got there and she's teaching part of the course, she's like, "Why aren't you in grad school?" And I said, "Oh, well, I don't want to retake the GRE. My scores are too old." And, I had all these excuses. I didn't know if how I was going to pay for it, and I had been a little burnt out the first time after I got into school. I was like, "Oh, never again," right? We always do that. And so she sends me this letter in the mail because she knew I was a double mind, didn't know what I wanted to major in. She sends me this letter in the mail that says, "You have been provisionally accepted into the graduate program for family nurse practitioner. Show up to class on this date."
Wow.
So I did. That's how I got into grad school. Again, it was God putting me in a place
Mm.
where I was ready to accept what he had for me. And he
Mhm.
just strategically maneuvered me into these places.
Mhm.
I got there and discovered that I love gerontology,
Mhm.
not so much pediatrics. I've never worked in peds, so I thought I'd give it a go. I like kids. I did not like working in pediatrics. In fact, it wasn't that I didn't like the pediatrics, is I missed the geriatrics so much
Mm.
so that I thought, well, maybe I could just go back and volunteer to spend time with the residents because I missed them. And that's when the light bulbs went on.
Okay.
And so, in
Yeah.
typical fashion with me, I never do anything the easy way because,
Mm.
what's the fun in that? I was a dual major at the time, nursing education and family nurse practitioner. So I dropped the family nurse practitioner and went into the Gero program because that's where my love was. So I'm like, let's
Okay.
do what we love. And I finished my nursing education master's and got my postmaster's as a GNP, as a gerontological nurse practitioner. And so I discovered that because I love learning and I'm always interested in doing different things, I'm the girl that would find extra classes to take, which is how I ended up with a bachelor's in biology with a minor in French and Bible,
Mm.
and then a bachelor's in nursing with a minor in psychology and a
Mm.
double major in graduate school.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah. So, parlez-vous français?
Uh, Very little, very rusty. I'm trying to work on it. But I did French in high school and college. And
Mhm.
so because I don't speak it very much, I read it better than I can speak it.
Understood. But you said
Yeah.
something very interesting to me. You said, do what you love. Do what you
Mhm.
love. So, and where did that come from? I mean, have you always been someone who would say to herself, do what you love, or is that something that came to you like a lot of the other things regarding school and nursing and the like?
I think I've always been that independent thinker
Mm.
to where even as a kid, if it's something that I didn't want to do, I wasn't going to do it.
Mm.
So I was a bit of a stubborn child in that regard. which kind of got me in trouble a little bit in school because um, I remember one day I was a musician. I'm a musician, so I was in band,
Okay.
and our band director lived across the street from us, so they were friends with my parents. And it was very hot that day, and there were a lot of bees, and I was just like not in the mood for rehearsal and being outside. And I don't know what it was, but just looking at our band director just irritated me to no end. And he's like, I don't know what is your attitude today, but you're going to have to run laps. And I just looked at him and said, I'm not running anywhere. I'll walk it, but I'm not running. I
Mm,
told you I don't run. Nothing's chasing me.
mm,
So he just made me so mad and irritable that day. I don't know why. I think it was just hot. I was tired and I just wasn't feeling it. So I had to do 10 laps around the football field. I sauntered around those laps.
uh,
I just didn't feel like doing anything. And I just was really irritable. And he's like, I don't know what was with your attitude today. I was like, I just flat out told him, I said, you're just getting on my nerves.
mm,
Just leave me alone. and, and he went and talked to my mom about it. My mom was just like, just let it go. She'll be fine tomorrow. But I was always that person that if I didn't want to do something, you're not going to make me do something.
mm, yeah.
But if I wanted to do something, I would just go full steam ahead and then ask permission later.
Mhm. Yeah, I
It's
gotcha.
it's so much easier to apologize
Yeah,
afterwards than to ask for permission.
yeah.
But I was a practical child, so for me, it was I would do things if it was worth being hassled about, right?
Mm,
My sister was the opposite. My sister just did things because she said, see, do, that was it. No thought went into
yeah.
it. She just went and did it. But I
Mhm.
was more practical. I'm like, is it worth me listening to my mom rag on me, getting on punishment, that type of thing to do the thing that I wanted to do? And if it wasn't, I was like, I don't need to
Mm.
do it.
Yeah, but you seem to have this knowing. I want to get deeper into
Hmm.
the kinds
Hmm.
of things because you've done a lot.
Hmm.
And I'm so curious about the knowing that you are demonstrating as you talk about your career. Let me ask you this: how did you know that you should create this health training course? I mean, where did that come from?
Yeah. Well, it was a lot of people messaging me. Was getting messages on Facebook
Mm,
and emails and phone calls, and people would come in and say, I talked to so and so and they said I should talk to you about XYZ in business.
mm,
And I would think, okay, all right, so let's sit down and talk about it. And it got to be where I was getting multiple messages from different places. I said, there's got to be a better way for us, for me, and for them. And so that's how I developed the Nurse Shark Academy because I wanted nurses to know that they can be business owners.
mm.
I wanted others to know that nurses can also be business owners. In meeting so many different people, they're like, oh, I didn't know nurses could own businesses. And I thought, of course we can. Nurses can do anything.
Mm.
And so I thought this is a great way for me to help other nurses um, build their dreams.
Mm. Okay, so what is the Nurse Shark? I like the phrase. I like the title, Academy. What is that? What are you trying to do with that?
Well, obviously, we're nurses, right?
Yep.
But we're also sharks. Sharks are experts in their field.
Mm.
And so when I was playing around with, finding a name, I looked at nurse babe, nurse boss, nursepreneur, all those things were trademarked and taken and I wanted something unique. So I researched the nurse shark, which is an actual shark.
Okay.
And what I found interesting about that shark was that it was a non-lethal shark. It's a gentle shark, but it's still a shark. And the more I thought about that, I said, we see nurses and they're always like nurses are angels and caring and all
Mm.
this. But I wanted you to know we're still nurses.
Yeah.
We're still sharks.
Uh-huh.
And so that's why we became the Nurse Shark Academy.
I like it. So what kinds of, you've worked with other nurses who wanted to become entrepreneurs, own their own businesses. What are some of the things that some of them have done? Maybe two, if you like. Yeah.
Well, I have one. She's always messaging me. She's great. And she started her CPR training school. So she started teaching CPR classes, which is what I done years ago and still do. But I started years ago as a student nurse to make extra cash. I was a hustler back then. And so she started that business, but that led her to start her CNA training school. And so now her business is contracting with other public schools to go in and do CNA training so that their high school students can learn how to be CNAs to go work in the nursing homes and home health care and things like that. So
Yeah,
she's got a great business where she's contacting these different schools and she's working with them.
that's fantastic. That's great. You were a part of that. You were part of
Yes.
making,
Yeah,
that's awesome.
she called me and said, "Oh, Miss Tina, when because I had her do her business plan and we worked through that business plan process, which is not what everybody thinks of as that dry old, business plan that we do. No,
Mhm.
we have a roadmap for your business." And she had to go to the bank to do some sort of transaction, open up a new account or something, and they asked her for her financials and her financial plans, and she said, "And I had it done, and I could just hand it right to them." I said, "This is why." So
Yeah,
anytime she goes for a contract and they want to know what her plan, marketing, and all that stuff, she can pull it right out because she's already done the work and laid the foundation.
that's fantastic. That's great. Any other examples you care to share or not before I move on?
Yeah. So my cousin is a social worker actually, and she launched her business. She was a social worker in Chicago public schools for years. Decided to retire and start her own social work practice specifically for children and helping them along their way. And so I helped her with some of her business plan and marketing and things like that. And so it's been great. So I've helped
Mm.
my cousin. So, and right now I'm getting ready to work with a client who happens to be a massage therapist. And we have an appointment tomorrow, and she wants to open up a massage therapy school. So we're going to make it happen.
That sounds like a good idea to me. That's great. So now I know that you are a mentor with the Pass the Torch Foundation.
Mhm.
Is that a part of the Charlotte Academy, or is this something different?
This is something different.
Uh,
Well, when I joined Pass the Torch, I actually met their executive director at a women's networking group. I
mm,
was attending that group fairly regularly once a month, and we get together and got to know one another. And they asked me to be a mentor. So, as a mentor, I just meet with some of the women that are there. And one of them in particular happened to be a student who was in the mortuary science group. She wanted to own her own funeral home.
wow.
Now, I didn't know anything about the funeral home business, right? Other than being a patron, right? With attending funerals. I'm a minister, so that's how I work with funeral homes and a nurse practitioner. So I had my fair share of funerals to attend,
I got you.
and so I learned a lot from that process and working with her about the ins and out of developing a funeral business. But because I had those business connections,
Mm,
I was able to refer her to other mentors who were actual funeral directors. And I found out that there aren't a lot of female funeral directors. And sometimes they're even actively discouraged from being in the business.
right.
It's still a very male dominated field. And I never would have thought of that. But I learned a lot from her. But in that coaching situation, I was able to help her navigate changing her program because her program shut down.
Uh,
Their professor retired. They couldn't find one quick enough to replace him.
mm.
And so helping her navigate all those different things and get her plan ready to start. And that was just me giving back to the community. And that's why I love to be a part of that foundation.
That's fantastic. So is Pass the Torch, I know you're in the state of Indiana in the
Yes.
USA. Is
Mhm.
Pass the Torch local to that state, or is it national?
It's local to that state, to the
Uh-huh.
state. Mhm.
I see. Wow, pass the torch. I'm happy that you're passing the torch. That's awesome.
Yes.
Yeah. Now I want you've been a registered nurse, well, a CNA, then registered nurse and nurse practitioner, gerontology as a specialty. I want to look at what you've learned about health and healing. So globally, what have you learned about health and healing over your long career and studies as a nurse?
I'm going to say this, our overall health starts here.
Hmm.
It's how we think and our mindset. We have to have a more positive outlook in our life. What I've discovered is that in my work in psychiatry, I can tell the difference between two sets of clients. There's the clients that have a more positive outlook in life. They've got more hope. Things happen to they have the same bad things happen, death of loved ones, loss of jobs, but they're able to rise and come above it
Mm,
because they see that they can make a change and a difference in their life. Then I
mm,
have a set of clients that the same things happen to them, but it completely destroys them because they don't have any hope that
mm,
things will ever get better. And
mm.
so my job is to help bolster that hope in them. And
Uh-huh.
that's my first job. I can give you the medications, I can give you all the talk and everything. But until you decide in your mind that you're going to get better, you're going to stay stuck. And I've seen that time and time again. I've seen that with patients with cancer and terminal illnesses. I've seen the patients that will themselves to live and those that will themselves to die.
Wow.
And so we need to take our choice back, our power back, and look at what we're doing to ourselves. And I tell people, because I teach chronic disease management, I
Yeah.
tell people, you didn't get here overnight. So don't expect to get out of it overnight. It's a
Mm,
process. So, yes, you can change your diet and exercise and do those things, and you should.
mm,
But don't expect it to turn like a switch and you're going to be 50 pounds lighter and have all this energy. It's going to take time,
mm.
and you have to keep at it and keep part of the process.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I love what you're saying, that it begins in the mind. So what came to me is that you're really talking, a person can be transformed,
Yes,
right? And that could take, well, what do you think? I mean, can a person though get a different idea and switch overnight? What do you think?
I think there can be a change, a switch
Mhm.
in your mindset and thought,
Uh,
but that those impacts that you have, those scars that you have, will take time to heal.
Understood.
So you can make that switch. I've seen people who stop smoking cold turkey, stop drinking cold turkey. I had a gentleman come in and he was in his 60s and he never come in for treatment for his drinking. He was an alcoholic.
Mm,
And I asked him, I said, "What made today the day you wanted to make a change?"
mm.
And he said, "It was because my son became an alcoholic and my grandson is headed the same way. And I decided it was going to stop with me and I'm going to be the example for my family." He made
Wow.
a decision. Did he still have to go through the pain of withdrawal? Yes. Did he still have to take it one day at a time and work his program? Yes. But he made a decision which changed the course of his life, which will change the course of his son's life and change the course of his grandson's life.
Hmm. So in terms of the key to change, the key to a human being change, what would you say is the key? What is the key?
I would say a made up mind, a made
Love
up
it.
mind.
Yeah.
When I decided to launch my podcast, which just came out 2 weeks ago. So
Oh, great.
um, I wanted to showcase nurse entrepreneur owners. And I've been working on this for over 2 years. And I said I wanted to do this by 2022. I was going to put it off to 2023. But I said, no, we're going to do it. We're going to launch it. We're going to get the stuff together. I brought the technical team in to help me out, to figure some stuff out. And I said, we're going to do it. And I got there and I did the first episode. And I'm doing my own production and everything. So I'm learning because I want to do the skills, and then later on somebody else can do the skills. That's kind of how I work. So I did it and I got it up and I thought, this wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. But you have to understand that 2-year process was important because I had to learn things like video production. I had to learn a little bit about how to work the audio. I had to learn how to, one, really use Zoom, because that's what I'm using as my platform, use Canva. I had to learn all those things to get me ready to be in the perfect mindset to say, hey, let's just give it a go and do it. It may not be pretty, it may not be perfect,
Yeah.
it may not be right good, as they say, but we got it done.
Mhm.
And so for me, that was like a huge win because I've been working on it for 2 years and I finally just did it. I got out of my head. I stopped trying to be perfect at it and I just did it. And it's like, oh. And so I tell other people, I said, everything is figure outable. That's what one of my coaches tells me. And I said, I just figured it out. And, it's from talking to people like you that gave me the confidence to do that, to, being on other people's podcasts and say, I think I can do this. Now, back this up. I have a background in radio.
Okay.
So full disclosure, I was a DJ in high school and college. I even had my FCC license because, we had to get that when I was in high school and keep it so we could be on the radio. And so my mom was in public relations in radio and television and made me promise never to go into radio and television. Right? Because she saw the good and the bad of it. And she wanted more for me. And she also told me I couldn't become a singer like Diana Ross, which was my other dream when I was a kid. Because she didn't want me to live that rock and roll lifestyle. But I took the class because I ran out of classes to take in high school. And it was the only class that fit in my schedule. And I loved it.
Yeah.
And so I started a few years ago a weekly Facebook Live news show. It started because of the pandemic. And I was just telling people, hey, this is where you can get supplies. And hey, this is where you can get your COVID vaccine when it was ready. And this is where you can go for this. So I was giving people COVID information. And then, so I forget what happened, but it was a big news story that came out. And suddenly I was following these news stories and reporting on what I was seeing and commentating on them. And the next thing I know, I now have a full-blown news show every week where I'm curating stories. I'm telling people what's happening in the practice and in the industry. And I try to put a nurse making a difference segment on every week. If I can find a nurse that's doing something, I like to shout out to them. Has grown. So every week I have this program. And we're just now rebranding because we're now going to be on YouTube and other places. And so I say that because nothing is wasted. I didn't know taking broadcasting in high school and college would ever turn into a skill that I could use later and be comfortable sitting talking on a mic.
That's fantastic. Well, look, let's unpack. You just gave a ton right there. So let's roll back a little bit. First, I want to ask you, from your experience of working with people, what holds people back?
I think it's holding on to past hurts. It's that lack of forgiveness. If we hold on to the people that have maybe hurt us, whether or not they apologize, acknowledge it, it really derails our growth. I had a woman in the nursing home. And all of a sudden she went through this depression. She was crying and tearful. We didn't know what was happening. So I sat down and spoke with her. She told me she was upset because her brother had molested her when she was younger and never apologized for it. But he never acknowledged it or anything. But he lived this great life, made all of this money, did very well, got married, had all these children. And although she got married, she didn't have children and she didn't have, she struggled all of her life and she could not understand why he never acknowledged what he did to her. And she's been holding on to this for years. And part of the reason why it started to come out was because she was developing a little bit of dementia. So she didn't have that frontal lobe there to kind of keep those emotions at bay and to kind of reason it out. And so we had a long discussion. So I told her, I said, you need to forgive your brother. I said, not for you, not for him, but for you. You need to forgive your brother because you've let him have power over you your entire life. And let's make it stop today. Let's forgive your brother so that you can be free. And so I had her do an exercise where she wrote a letter to him and told him all the things that she was angry about with him. And then at the end, we tore the letter up because he's never going to get the letter. She didn't even know where he lived, right? But for her, that was such a release that she started to open up and get more friends where she was living, because she come to the end of her life and realized that this was holding her back for her entire life.
Wow. That's powerful, Tina Marie. That's amazing. So holding, I mean, that's interesting that you said, I asked you, the question was, what holds people back? And you answered one thing was the inability or them or a person not forgiving. That surprised me. I didn't know that would be like number one. So what else? What are some other things do you think holds people back? Let's say that someone wants to do something in business or whatever, but they never get started. What holds them back?
Fear. False expectations appearing real. People think that, again, it was, and that was partially what was holding me back with the podcast, was a little bit of fear. And it manifests itself in so many different ways, in perfectionism, procrastination. And so it's thinking that what happens if I fail?
Yeah.
And I've taken the approach that the only failure that's not acceptable is not getting started.
Yeah.
Failure is a part of the scientific process. We fail all the time as scientists, right? All the time. Because you have an experiment, it doesn't work. Maybe you start a business and you have to make a pivot. No one could have predicted that we were going to have a pandemic in 2020, right? And in fact, I remember in 2020 was like, this is going to be the best year ever. We were all excited, right? And for some people, despite the pandemic, it was, because they were able to pivot and shift. But for others who were almost left behind, it was harder for them to move forward. I had several people that were like, oh, I never want to get on Zoom. Oh, I don't want to do social media. Oh, I don't want to be online. And suddenly the world shuts down and their business closed down. And it's because they weren't able to make that shift to where the people were going to be. And so I noticed this, that now all of a sudden people were more interested in meeting on Zoom and talking to you. I used to reach out to people on LinkedIn and I said, hey, let's schedule a phone call. Let's schedule a Zoom meeting. They're like, why? Because if I'm going to refer business to you, I'd like to at least have a conversation.
Right.
Or why did you accept the connection request? But now people are more open. It's like, yeah, let's chat. Here's my calendar link. I'm amazed at how people are so resilient and able to make that change. But the people that let fear stand in their way, oftentimes don't make it, and they miss the boat. I think of the nurses that wanted to have a staffing agency. They wanted to build that staffing agency. I have a friend who did, and she's doing well. She's like got a multi-million-dollar business right now. And she had called me, asked me for a little bit of advice, and boom, she's doing her thing. Yeah. And so, and it's not to say this because of my advice, but she just picked my brain and she's doing her thing. But she was right there and positioned for when the pandemic happened. She had her business running, she had staff to send, and she's able to do that. And she just built her brand new home. That's now fantastic. Others are now like, oh, we should jump on the wagon and we should get our staffing agency. And I'm not saying it's not a good business now, but you've missed an opportunity because you've been kind of sitting around and thinking about it. And and I understand that she had more capital and more people behind her to do that than some other people. But again, everything is figure outable.
I like that word.
Yes. And it's not mine. I got it from one of my coaches that I follow. But I think if those people had struck when the iron was hot, they could have been where she is, but they weren't ready to move forward. Now, that's not saying that you totally missed all your chances, because maybe a different chance will come along, but you have to stay to where you understand what the shifts are going to be and see how the landscape is changing so you can ride that wave. So, yeah. So don't let fear stop you.
I like it. I like it, Tina. Now, you've already touched upon mental health when you were giving an example about this woman in the nursing home. So when you look at the landscape today, the wellness of people from the neck up, what do you see? For example, you know about the suicides
Yes.
recently. Well, what do you see? Why are we hurting?
You know, I think there's a big disconnect. I was just speaking with someone about this because when I found out, and we're probably talking about Twitch, when
Yeah.
I found out what happened, I thought, my first thought was, did he not have any mates, any friends to talk to? But yeah, I think about it. We have a lot of friends on social media, friends that, but who do you call in the midnight hour,
Mm,
right?
mm,
Who do you call when you're really hurting and struggling? And so I think because of the pandemic, we were so separated, not to mention the social and political climate that we were in since around 2012. It actually started in 2012, not just in 2016.
mm.
Where you could see that big disconnect that was happening. And people are so angry right now. And I think because of that, there's no place to put that anger. We haven't had a chance to process it. It's very interesting how things are much different than, let's say, 9/11. When 9/11 happened, the country came together. I was in New York after 9/11, like 2 weeks after the whole thing. I was with the Red Cross, so I was deployed, and I was out there, and everyone in New York was so nice and so giving and so we're going to take care of one another and all of this, right? And it was happening across the country and all of this. And at the very beginning of the pandemic, it started that way. People were like, "Oh, nurses!" That was the first time anybody ever came up to me and said, "Thank you for your service as a nurse." And
Mm.
I thought, I'm not a veteran, but I realized we're in a war here. Okay, pandemic was really a war. But now it's like we have to have signs up that says if you act up in the ER, we're just going to call the police and have them haul you off. Be civil, don't cuss people out, don't threaten people. We have to go to that. And I saw a couple years ago that the suicide rate among nurses was going up and up and up.
Wow.
And
Ooh.
it doubled. Yeah.
Mm,
And I thought, I've got to do something. I can't just report on it. I was like, when I saw that, I said, I can't just report on this as news. I need to do something. So I developed a spiritual renewal day for nurses. I said, let's get together and let's talk about some self-care. Let's do some things that will help you to manage what's going on, and it do some real self-reflection.
mm,
And so I think what's happened is that there's not been an outlet. That's now we've got the new hotline that you can call. I think it's 988 for suicide. So I see there's a lot more people are aware of it. Mental health. Simone Biles is a great example of her saying, "Hey, I need a mental health day from this Olympics because I'm not mentally prepared and I'll get hurt if I don't do that." And making it okay to say, I need to take care of my mental health.
yeah.
There's such a stigma about mental health, and it's a shame. Mental health is physical health. You can't separate the mind and the body like that. If you're sick in your mind, you're going to be sick in your body. If you're sick in your body, it's going to affect how your mind operates. And
Mm,
so we need to understand that. And because we can't always just take an x-ray and show, yep, that's where your depression is. We can't do that, but we need to know that it's okay to ask for help. It's important to do that. And so I always tell my sharks and my folks, I said, listen, you have to do like they teach you on the airplane. Put your oxygen mask on first before you help someone else. You cannot continue to give from an empty well.
yeah.
And this awareness for me started several years ago when I was a manager on a psychiatric unit. And I
Mm,
took a 2-week vacation, my first 2-week vacation ever. And I did absolutely nothing for 2 weeks. And I felt great at the end of that second week. And I came back to work. And within 30 minutes, I was already having chest pain again. because of the stress. And I realized I have to make a change for my own mental health. And my first thought was, y'all trying to kill me. I'm not letting you kill me, because my beeper was going off all the time. I would get so irritated when that beeper would go off. I've broken a couple of them throwing them against the wall,
Yeah.
because I would just get so enraged. And I realized I was really burnt out,
Yeah.
and I needed to make a change. And so before we get to a place of no hope, maybe it's time we recognize, hey, I got to throw a flag on the play.
Yeah.
We need a timeout. I've got to take a reset. And I think the pandemic allowed a lot of people to do that and have that reset, and then reevaluate what was important to them in their lives.
Wow, that's you're doing good work, and understanding is coming through loud and clear for sure. So I know that you've worked with women,
Mhm.
and what would you say is the status? I'm not sure if this would be a good way of putting it, though, but I want you to give us a sense of where are women, of course, in your judgment, in terms of their health. Let's look worldwide, if you can speak to that.
I'm going to say that right now, women, and in particular nurses, but women across the board, we are always taking care of other people
Mhm.
and not taking care of ourselves. And so we're usually the last person on the list, right? After all, everybody's got what their needs are met. We finally say, okay, now it's my time. And then a lot of times we're just too tired to do anything with the time that we do have.
Mhm.
And so it's making those adjustments with your schedule, adjusting your time, blocking your time, but making sure that you're on the list, right?
Mhm.
Because I talk to so many women that says, I'm not even on the list, let alone making time for myself. I'm not even on the schedule. No, make sure you do that. Because again, if you're not healthy, who's going to take care of the rest of the family when you're gone, right? You can work yourself into an early grave, or you can set healthy boundaries.
Mhm.
And I saw this with a friend of mine who's a nurse, a great caretaker, but she always took care of everyone else in the family. And then suddenly she was sick, and, had to have that hard conversation of, maybe you need to say no sometimes. No is a complete sentence,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. Now, you've also spoken and perhaps even written about women and addiction.
Yes.
What would you like to share with us about that? What have you found out, and what do you share with women who are facing addiction of various kinds?
Oftentimes we have patterns in our life. And what was interesting when I looked at my research, because I was looking at health as expanding consciousness. So it's that a whole awareness
Mhm.
of the patterns that are in our life that's impacting our well-being. So in the particular case study, I spoke with this nurse who happened to had a past with alcohol. And as I was speaking with her, I noticed that there were themes and patterns that were emerging. And a lot of it was abuse,
Mhm.
neglect as a child, wanting to be accepted, never feeling loved or enough. And these are some of the things that we tell ourselves. We have that imposter syndrome. People have written about that. And, that we're not enough, we're not good enough. And a lot of it stemmed from some of that. And then, so what happened, because she had an unhappy childhood, and this is in the research, it was coming out to the research with all the other case studies as I was analyzing it. There was a theme of, I'm looking for something to fill that void. And so this particular nurse and several others had found in a relationship with someone that was an alcoholic, who introduced them to alcohol and introduced them to the party and lifestyle. And so you're trying to find that, to fill that void, to feel joy, because that's how you get your validation, right? Is you be the life of the party. And that led to further than some domestic violence and other things like that. And so that's where some of the research showed out that sometimes you can, if you can identify those patterns that are happening and repeating themselves in your life, you can make a change and make a conscious change. And so when that happened, I'm proud to say this nurse, she blossomed and flourished. And I worked with her for a long time.
Mm,
I worked with her when she was a CNA, and I saw her become a nurse,
mm,
and she getting confidence in herself and doing things. I just remember so many great things that happened. And she was also a caretaker. This is the other thing. She had a lot of responsibility thrust on her as a young child because she had to take care of an aging grandparent.
mm,
So instead of being taken care of, she was caretaking for the family and all that
mm,
responsibility. So it was a means of escape. So when we talk about those things, we look at what were those patterns that were laid down maybe when you were younger that you're repeating later in life. Can we stop that? Can we make a change? Can we do something different? And change your mindset around that. That's what a
mm,
lot of cognitive behavioral therapy does, is talks about taking those things that happen and reframing them.
mm,
And so we talk about that. And so she was able to thrive, and I'm so proud of her.
mm,
I'm very proud of her, and I see her from time to time.
mhm. That's great. Look, you've also had your radar, as I understand it, on the health of children.
Hmm.
What do you care to share with us about that? Where are we, and
Hmm.
what kinds of things do you recommend that we do to take better care of our children? And I hope that I wasn't too presumptuous.
No,
Um,
no, I'm going to say children, because of the work I do with some of the children. I volunteer with the youth detention center and different things like that. And what I've seen with children is that we don't listen as adults.
mm,
We need to listen to understand. Even the smallest child um, experiences things in such a deep way. I
mm,
give you an example. My great nephew hurt his hand, hurt his finger, and my mom always taught him, you if you're hurting or whatever, you call on Jesus.
mm,
So his hand was hurting. He wanted a band-aid. Nina wasn't moving fast enough. So he picked up the phone. He was like 3 years old, picked up the phone and said, Jesus, my hand hurts.
mm,
You heal my hand. And then I don't know what conversation he had with Jesus. We said, okay, thank you, amen, and went on to play, right?
mm,
They listen to us, and we have to listen to them.
mm.
Sometimes they'll tell you what's happening deep in their hearts.
Yeah.
When my dad died, my great nephew, who was his buddy, we were at the funeral, and I said, do you want to go up there? I'll go with you. He said, no, because Papa's heart isn't there.
Mm,
He's 5, but he had such an understanding of death.
mm,
And this is what I'm saying, is that a lot of times we as adults don't understand, or don't think that they understand, but they understand a lot more than we give them credit for. And when I've worked with kids and they're telling me things, especially kids that have, illnesses and they're terminal and things like that, and it's really
yeah.
sad, I
Mm,
listen to them because they know when something's wrong. And if we try to hide it from them,
yeah.
that makes them even more scared and anxious.
Yeah.
And so having those courageous conversations with
Mm,
them and answering their questions and being there for them without getting so upset.
yeah.
I remember there was an adolescent that I had, and he's so funny. And when he came into my office, when I was a supervisor, I was doing the intakes in the psychiatry unit. And he was just all over the place. I mean, he made me nervous. I mean, he had ADHD, severe ADHD. I'm like, okay, I'm not a big proponent of medication, but sweetie, you need some meds.
Mm,
This is how it was. I mean, he just could not sit still. I mean, just into the cabinets, into this, into just talking. He'd start a sentence and couldn't finish the sentence because his mind was already off on something else.
mm,
So I said, okay, let's I'll talk to the doctor, we'll get him admitted, we'll, do the testing, talk to him and, work on it. We get him admitted, they get him on medication. This kid comes back and sees me. We're out in the grocery store. And he runs up and gives me a big hug and said, "You're the one who put me in the hospital. Thank you, thank you, thank you."
Wow.
Because he was doing better in school. His grades came up. He was able to focus. He recognized that he had some distress, right? But he couldn't articulate it. But because I listened and I saw him and I said, "Let's get you the help that you need." And he was so much better for it. This is a kid that I had another kid, he ended up growing up, getting married, went into the military. He had a lot of anger when he was younger, but we worked with him and he flourished and thrived. I saw him in the store. He introduced me to his wife and his kid. And I'm like, this is great. And so you can make a real difference by just listening. And meeting them where they are. I'm not afraid to get down on the floor and sit with them and talk with them if that's where they are.
That's powerful story that you shared too. And you know something? I hope that I remember what you just said, because oftentimes we are good at, well, I'm good at telling kids or teaching kids, but you said, listen. That's a good lesson. Thank you for that. Yeah, so I want to ask you, you've already mentioned mindset, but you blogged something that I said, oh, I got to ask her about that. You said it was about COVID and mindset. And you've touched upon mindset, during this conversation. But can you tell us what were you doing in that blog about COVID and mindset?
Well, I think a lot of times people were living and operating in fear. Fear of the unknown. Should I get vaccinated? Should I not get vaccinated? I'm not going to tell you either way. That's up to you, between you and your doctor. But I am going to say this. We can't live in a state of constant fear. And what I saw is that a lot of my clients, because we were isolated for so long, they were afraid to come out, particularly my older adult clients. They were like, oh, I don't know if I can go out. I'm afraid. And I said, take precautions, wear your mask, use your hand sanitizer, get plenty of sleep, take care of your body. If you're sick, don't go out. If somebody's sick, don't go visit. But you can't live in fear. And I think a lot of times we were letting that fear rule our lives. Interesting enough, we stayed away from people, but we weren't constantly at home. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
When COVID happened and they let us work from home and we were doing all the work from home, and because at first they were like, okay, everybody just go home and this will be a week or two and then we'll be back. And it was like, okay, maybe this is longer than we thought. We can't afford for you to, not work. So let's switch to telehealth. My husband and I still went out to eat every now and then.
Okay.
If the restaurants were open, we went out to eat. We did what we were supposed to do. We went to the grocery store. We wore our masks. We used our hand sanitizer. These were things that I was pretty much already doing anyway. Cold and flu season's happening. Let's stay safe, right? And so I think what happened is that people turned this into such a political thing that it was really a common sense thing of wash your hands. So I have this sign in my office that says, wash your hands. No, really, wash them, right? Because I want people to continue to do the things that they should do. I was like, I like the idea of having social distancing. I didn't like the idea of people standing close to me and clumped up together. I never liked that. So I was like, this is fine with me. But for other people, that's just not them. I mean, I have a friend and he was a close talker. I mean, when he talked to you, he's like right here. And I'm like, dude, you really need to get back up. You're in my personal bubble here. And so negotiating those things and renegotiating, it was so weird me taking my very first flight after COVID, right? I was nervous because I'm like, first of all, I'm in healthcare. So I'm in, when we're in the hospital, we're wearing a mask, we're doing all this stuff, we're in our office, we're doing all this. And now you're going to put me in basically a cylinder with a bunch of people, and I don't know if they're washing their hands, let alone been vaccinated, or they're going to cough on me. And all these things go through my mind. But I wanted to go because I was going to California. And I remember getting on the plane and everybody was wiping things down and it just seemed so clean. And I said, this isn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. I was afraid somebody was going to start a ruckus on the plane and we were going to, not be able to go. I just, all these things that you see on social media, right? And I realized we probably need to stop watching social media. Lizzo is right. We need to stop watching that stuff and believing everything that everybody says on social media. But yeah, I just remember being so fearful, but I had the best time when I went.
Uh-huh.
And so it's conquering those fears and being able to step out again and trust again.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The other day I was, it's cold and flu season, right? So the other day I was at the gas station and I was picking up a newspaper and a couple other things. And the cashier started coughing before I got up to the counter. Now she coughed like 4 times.
Mm.
I'm like really deep, phlegmy type coughs, okay?
Mm.
And into her hand, then into her elbow. And I'm thinking, you're not gonna touch my stuff. I don't know what you have. I mean, the flu that's been going around has been knocking people down. I mean, they're in bed for like a week or two. It's really bad flu. I said, plus it's RSV season. All these kids are getting RSV and all these older adults getting RSV. And oh yeah, and then we still have COVID and possibly monkeypox and everything else. I don't know what you have. Why aren't you wearing a mask? Why are you at work when you're sick? Now, 3 years ago, we would have been like, whatever.
Mm.
But now I'm like, why are you at work when you're sick? And the other lady behind me was like backing up too. I'm like, we don't know what you have. Why are you coughing in our direction?
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Well, Tina, I've really enjoyed our conversation. Hey, but let me ask this: is there anything else you care to share with us that we have not touched on today?
I would say, you know, everything is possible,
Mm.
right? I argue with my calculus teacher,
Mm.
and I told him that time travel was possible. And he said, I can't figure out the math. I don't know how it's possible. I can't figure out the math. And I said, but if you understand that time is a construct,
Yeah.
then it can be manipulated. Therefore, time travel is possible. And I just blew his mind. And he was working on that project for a long time trying to figure this out. And
Uh-huh.
I'm like, see, I'm coming from a metaphysical, psychological construct, and you're coming from mathematics. But I tell
Yeah.
you what, they will meet one day. I said,
Uh,
time is a construct. That's why I say
yeah.
everything is possible.
That's great. I love it. Look, I got to bring you back because I want to talk about. You said everything is possible, and you also said metaphysical.
Hmm.
Look, we got to talk again if you're open to it.
Sure,
Maybe in
sure.
2023. I want to explore that thing because
Hmm.
this is, after all, the Possibility Action Network. So, Tina, it's been a pleasure having you today on the show. Thank you so much for joining me. You've been listening to the Possibility Action Network podcast. Our guest today has been Tina Baxter. I'm your host, Stephen Middleton. Until next time, good day. You are not alone, just keep